the latest episode of the Kansas Moonshot Podcast, where we are shining the spotlight on amazing things happening in schools across the state. Whether you're one of the Mercury, Gemini, or in the near future Apollo schools launching some amazing redesign plans, or a teacher trying to do something a little different, I want to share your story. The goal is to celebrate the awesomeness all around us. This week we have a special guest, Dr. Randy Watson, the Commissioner of Education for the state of Kansas. He shares a little of his background and the background of the Kansas Moonshot Redesign initiative, as well as the state's role in supporting teachers in their redesign projects. Check it out. All right, well, thank you for being on the show today. But before we get started, if you could just share a little bit of your background, because I know you've got a pretty extensive background in education. So could you give us the highlights of your education background?
Sure, Josh.
Before your current role?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'm a native Kansan, grew up in southeast Kansas in Coffeyville. Went to Kansas State University, wanted always to teach kids and to coach kids, and majored in history. And got out of my undergraduate work and went to teach school in Tescott, Kansas, where I was the only social studies teacher that they had, and got the opportunity to be senior class and junior class sponsor and to coach girls volleyball, boys basketball, and track. So everyone in a small school knows what that's like when you do everything. And I had the opportunity to do that for several years. And then I went to Andover High School when there was just one high school in Andover and not two, and did very similar. I taught high school at Andover. I coached girls volleyball, boys basketball for a number of years. Didn't have as many preps, which was nice. Also did some assistant track coaching there. And then I started my administrative work. I was doing that master's work in the summers, and I took an assistant principal job in Concordia. Later on became principal in Concordia at Concordia High School. Then in 93 moved to McPherson as assistant superintendent, and I became superintendent there in 2005. Completed my doctorate, by the way, when I was in Concordia as high school principal, and then became Commissioner of Education officially in November of 2014, and transitioned my job from Superintendent McPherson to this job between 2014 and 15. So that just exhausted everyone, including me. All that means, Josh, is that I'm old. That's what all that means. I'm an old guy. So.
That means you're very wise. That's what it means. Well, so then that leads into you guys started this huge redesign plan. So what kind of started all of that? What got the ball rolling to where we're at today? Because I know a lot of people have been on different spots along the path, but I don't think a lot of people don't know where it all started.
Sure. So this is uniquely a Kansas thing. When I took the job, I grabbed Brad Nuenswander and we went out to 20 different locations in Kansas, and we asked three simple questions. The first question was, think of a successful 24-year-old living in the state of Kansas. Just think of that person. And there was nothing magical about the age of 24. We picked that because we thought it might be someone who was ending their formal education. But we said, think of what you think of success, however you define it in your own head. Think of a successful 24-year-old. Now describe that person in vivid detail. Give us the characteristics, the skill sets, the attributes of that person. That was question number one. Question number two was, what should K-12's role be, if any, in designing a system to educate that person you just described? So do we have any role in K-12 in designing an education system to meet the needs of what it needs to be successful for the person you just described? And then the third question, what's higher ed's role in that? And so the first question, we spent over a year developing a vision and goals around that data. And the second question led us to redesign, which is what Kansans said they thought we should do in our education system. related to those skill sets and attributes and characteristics of what a successful young person living in our state should look like. And that's basically it, Josh. I mean, it's really that simple. Now, we continue to add to that data set, but at the time, and it may still be, it was the largest qualitative study on education ever done in the history of our state. And so we still use that data. We constantly, when we're out, we add to that data set. I've got about 4,000, almost 5,000 pieces of data added to that set. I was out speaking yesterday and added to it again. But that's where it came from. Those were the origins of what redesign eventually became.
And then where did the moonshot idea come in?
Oh, well, I said earlier, I'm a history teacher. So I was constantly looking at what are the analogies and what are the metaphors that we want to use in describing where we want to go. And it just seemed like there were a lot of similarities to Kennedy's challenge to land a man on the moon by the end of the 1960s and return him safely to Earth at a time when NASA was not capable of launching a rocket that could orbit the Earth. The Soviets had already done that. They had put Sputnik up, and we could not do that, and yet Kennedy challenged us to put a man on the moon. So because of that, we said, well, why don't we take Kennedy's challenge, have a 10-year process in changing education in Kansas and call it our moonshot? And that's how it was born. And then from there, we're naming our phases of our redesign after those phases in the original NASA journey to the moon. So originally there was Mercury and the 7 original Mercury astronauts, and then Gemini was the second phase, and then Apollo was the third and final phase leading up to landing on the moon with Apollo 11. So that's how it came about. Again, pretty simple. We just looked at history and thought there were great analogies that we could and examples we could steal from how challenging it was to build something that had never been done before. And so that's what we're trying to do.
That's excellent. And I like that it's something that everybody can frame their minds around, and it's something that people can connect to. That's been helpful for us, kind of having, when we're explaining it to people, to pull in that analogy. So yeah, from the teacher side of it, it's been really helpful too.
Good.
With this redesign process, what are some things that you're really excited about? I know you get to travel around a lot. And
yeah, there's lots of things.
What's really exciting you?
There's lots of things, Josh. But so, I think we're going to talk about a little bit, what have we learned and we continue to learn. But I think the most exciting, there's so many, but here's I think the big one. We have Kansas teachers, Kansas principals, Kansas superintendents, but this is really being led by teachers in a flat organization. So this isn't like the school board said, go do this. I mean, the school board has a role in it, but we had to have an 80% vote of the faculty of each building that wanted to do it, and a letter of support from teacher unions. So it really is driven by teachers. And so we've asked teachers to do something that we've never asked them to do. So we've said, okay, flexible seating and Genius Hour are great, but that's a remodel. That's not a redesign. That's a great thing to do in your classroom, but how would you change the education of your school? Well, that's a different skill. That's what I'm most excited about, that, because I see teachers engaged in using their expertise to design the school they would want their own kids and own grandkids to go to. That is pretty powerful.
So on the other side of that, you mentioned some things that you guys have learned. So what are some of those challenges? Because you get the big overall view. What are some challenges that you guys have run across, and how are you kind of tackling some of those things that have come up? Yeah.
So I'm going to start with our Mercury and Gemini schools, what we've learned there, and then just kind of what we're learning overall. The work is very, very hard. It's time consuming. It's hard. It takes energy. It takes dedication. So let's start with that. It's hard. We knew it would be. There's hardly any disagreement from anyone, parents, business leaders, chambers of commerce, administration, teachers, that education should change. There's really no disagreement with that statement. Yeah, we should get better. It should change. When it does change drastically to meet the needs of families and kids, there's some pushback. And that's because I think we really don't want schools to change very much because they're tied to our youth. And we love to remember those things about it. And when it changes too much, parents get a little scared. Like, are we messing up? This isn't the school that looked like when I came to school. And so is that good or is that bad? Because we've done it for so long. And I went to this school, the same school that I went to, Josh, you went to, and my mother went to, and almost my grandmother. She went to a one-room schoolhouse initially. But we've been in 100 years of the same model, which is based on age, time, and content. And that model continues. So I think what's been really hard is altering that and then engaging, not communicating, engaging parents, engaging the business community in doing that work with us.
And I think especially mentioning the business community, that's been the biggest surprise for me is how on board they've been. Like they want to get in schools and they want to help out and jump in. At least that's just been my experience. And parents too, they want to get into the schools and be a part of that process.
Yes.
So where do you,
go
ahead.
But I think with any change, a lot of parents don't pay attention until the change actually happens. So I don't call this communication. I think all of our Mercury and Gemini communicated well. I'm not sure we engaged well, and that's only because we don't really engage. We really communicate. I had the opportunity to be over in Olathe last week, at a parent camp at Westview. And there I saw really engagement, right? We're sitting down with parents, not only discussing what was going on in Olathe, but their ideas of how they could make school better. It's a little bit scary. It's like a teacher giving a little freedom to kids, and you don't know where they're going to go with it. But it was a great session, and I think that's a challenge, but it's also part of our success going forward.
So where do you see, I know you said it's definitely teacher-led. So what do you see KSDE's role in the redesign process?
So we're twofold in it. One, we're providing the structure, the organization by which it can take place, some of the resources. And two, we're giving the coaching model. We're going to be with districts for 5 years. From the time they start their planning to what we call institutionalization, which we think will take 5 years. So we are constantly in training and coaching. But as you know, Josh, every school is different. Now, they have some commonalities. They're looking at social emotional learning with kids, and they're looking at how to personalize the experience and how to engage their parents and business community, how to do really good projects, real world projects. But the details of all that are very different in every school. And thus it should be designed by those teachers. So our role is simply to coach that, push it, coach it. And because it's very labor intensive work. And a lot of people say, well, we can do that on our own, which is in theory true. But we're meeting with schools every 2 weeks with assignments in between. And that pace is really fast and it's really hard. So that's our job, is to coach and do all those, push, help, and just be there when you need us.
Well, and you sent some really great guides with us with Jay and Tammy. Tammy's actually going to be on a podcast episode in a couple of weeks. I talked to her earlier this week. And so they've been a huge help all along the process.
Yeah, we hired Jay and Tammy for the sole purpose of working with school districts in the redesign process. And they are our lead boots on the ground and doing this work. And they will be with school districts through the 5-year process and others. But they've been remarkable. And course, we continue to learn, just like NASA learned from the first orbits to the spacewalk to getting closer to the moon. You build better rockets, you build better systems, and you get better at it. And so they've been great. Jay and Tammy have been great.
So as we're looking at this redesign process, schools are changing their entire systems. We still have this system in place of assessments. And so where does the redesign fit in with that? And how is that evolving along with the process?
Well, thanks for asking that, Josh, because it's a great question. So we think, and the board outcomes really focus on 7 areas that schools should be looking at as it relates to their outcomes. So one is social emotional learning. Design that locally, measure it locally, don't send any data to the state, have a good plan. And so you have plans for how to teach perseverance, for example, maybe you start your day in families, maybe you're a trauma-informed school, maybe you're working on suicide prevention, or the answer may be yes, you're working on all of those. That's one. Civic engagement is another. Have great individual plans to study with kids, starting no later than 8th grade, but start them whenever you want. Make sure you focus on students graduating from high school and going on to be successful in whatever their endeavors are post-high school. And one of the measures is make sure they're academically prepared also for the rigors. Academics are only one part of that. So we can't not have an academic measure. The problem in schools right now, Josh, is we have too many academic measures. So the state assessment is really only 2 days. We've shortened that down. We've shrunk that. But in most of our schools, we have AIMSweb data and DIBELS data and MAP data and Aspire data and state assessment data and teacher-created data. And almost all of that data is simply looking at the academic readiness. So we want to know the academic readiness of students, but we also want to know the health of students, the social emotional status of students. We want to know how well they're civically engaged, how well they can work with others, a whole host of other things that we need to be looking at along with state assessment scores.
So correct me, make sure I'm saying the right thing. It's one piece of the puzzle and it's not the entire puzzle. Because I know some people, it just gets kind of stressful thinking, oh my gosh, my numbers are not this or that. But really it's just one part that we're focusing on. But there's a whole child that we're really focusing on and getting data points from everything.
Yes, that's correct. And it's an important data set. The problem we had in No Child Left Behind, Josh, is that we made it the only thing. We only chased a math and reading score, by the way. We didn't even care about science and social studies. If you think about it. So all of those, so forget art, music, PE, any of that. But now we're saying, no, it's all important, and it's important in a balanced perspective. And so we have to balance that back out. But people say, well, are we going to get rid of the state assessment? No, but you shouldn't be test prepping for it. You should be teaching the standards, and it should be one. If you go to the doctor and you say, I don't feel very well, the doctor isn't just going to do one test to find out what's wrong with you. And some of what the doctor's going to do is she's going to do observation, and she's going to listen to you talk about what your issues are. So I think we need to look again at all those 7 data sets and then start making decisions. Is this student progressing in the way that we all think, the family, the student, and the school think that he or she ought to be progressing?
And then looking to the next steps as far as, as kids leave high school, how is the state working with some of those post-secondary programs to prepare them for, hey, you're getting a different set of students coming out of our schools, and the hope is that they're more well-rounded, they're more prepared, and they're better at problem solving, they're better in all these areas. How are post-secondary schools being prepared for this?
Well, we have a great relationship with the Kansas Board of Regents. Our board and their board work closely together, and we continue to do so. So everything that we're learning, we're sharing with them. And remember, when we did that original tour, the third question we ask is, what's higher ed's role in developing this person? So they're also working on that and what that should look like for them. and how we shift that. We're also working with the colleges of education as to what teachers should look like to come work in a redesigned school. Because what we hope is over the 10-year period from the time we started, that the whole system in Kansas will redesign itself. And so we're in a transition, of course, in the early transition phase of that. We're in about year 3 of that 10-year journey. But as we get closer to year 7 and 8, and we have a lot more, then teachers are going to need to have a different preparation. So the student going to the college is going to need that preparation, and that adjustment's going to be different. And then also the student teachers coming out are going to have to be different.
So we've got a whole bunch of schools right now. They're at all these different phases, but you've got a bunch of schools that are right in the heart of either their launch year or their plan year. So what advice, words of wisdom do you have for them, or words of encouragement for those teachers that are right now, they're taking that dive into redesign and it gets tough. And so what words of encouragement do you have for them?
Take a breath. Take a deep breath. Not while you're underwater. You know, when you pop up from the water, take a deep breath and know that it's really hard work. And I think every one of us that have been talking to our Mercury and Gemini say, you know, there are days where the greatest successes we've ever had are being shown, and there are days we're just in tears. Now, when we went into this, Josh, and this is important for as we think about those schools that will be joining up in Apollo and those Gemini 2 and some of the Gemini 1 that will be launching next year. We knew from everywhere we went across the country that redesign said from the time that you launch your redesign, which is happening in Mercury and some of the Gemini 1 right now, from August to Halloween is the worst experience of your life. Everything that you thought was going to go perfect doesn't go perfect. You're getting pushback from parents in the community. You're starting to doubt yourself. The older the kid, the more they're going to push back because this isn't school and I like to play school in certain ways. They said from Halloween to Christmas, it becomes tolerable. So think where we're at right now. We're at December 6th. And we think it's become tolerable. So there's more good than there's bad. And they said after Christmas, it starts to become the place that we always thought, that we dreamed about, and almost to a person, almost to a teacher when we went to those schools, they said, and it's the place I never want to leave because I designed this and it's working. So we're not there yet, right? We're almost to Christmas. And so I would just tell teachers, we're here. We're here with you. We understand how hard you're working. We understand the hours you're putting in, and you're making a difference. And every day, if you think back to August, this is better than it was in August, and it will be better in February than it is today.
All right. So you mentioned Apollo. What's coming up next as far as the launch cycle goes?
Oh, we're getting ready. In January, we'll have a webinar on January 23rd, of which we will go over with any school district that wanted to think about being in our Apollo phase, which is the next phase, and we'll have several phases of Apollo, but this is the first Apollo phase. The application then window will be from February 4th, 2019. It will open, and the Apollo window will close on April 5th, and then we will start really as we acknowledge who's going to be in that class, the Apollo class. We will start working with them over the summer, getting ready for their design year. Seems so long ago, right, Josh? The design year.
I know.
For them, and you know we have 47 school districts currently in Mercury and Gemini, 110 schools. You know, we want to get to 286. So we don't know how many people want to volunteer, but we're here to make Apollo successful for them. And we're looking forward to having school districts sign up, including more in Olathe. So that'll be great.
That would be awesome. So if people want a little bit more information about redesign, if they're in the process of this and they want to get more info, what's the best place for them to look for that?
Okay, so several places. One, go to our website, ksde.org. ksde.org, and you simply click on Kansas Can Redesign. And there's every bit of information you can find. That's one. You can contact Jay or Tammy, and it's pretty easy. So it's J, the letter J, Scott, SCOTT, at ksde.org, or Tammy, T for Tammy, T Mitchell, MITCHELL, at ksde.org, and say, hey, I'm interested in Apollo. I want to do some more things with that. And can you help me out? And can you steer me in the right direction? And they will connect you with all the resources that you need to make that decision. Oftentimes, Josh, I have comments from teachers at an ed camp or something, and they'll say, well, I know our staff wants to do this, but what if our principal doesn't want? Get everyone together. Get everyone together. This shouldn't be principal driven any more than it should be a superintendent driven. Get everyone and have a conversation. And Jay and Tammy would be happy to come over and talk to you. And so that would be important. And also, if you want to learn in depth about this, simply make plans in early March to come to the Kansas Can Symposium in Manhattan, Kansas. And I'm looking here for the date. Is it
right after Mace?
Yes, it's right after Mace. So it's that next week after Mace. So it's the week of March 4th. March 4th, 5th, 6th. It's in that week. Come to that conference. You're going to hear from Mercury and Gemini schools. You're going to hear the good, bad, and the ugly. You're going to hear how excited they are. You're going to be able to talk to me or Brad Nunswander or Jay and Tammy, and it'll be right in the sweet spot of the open window for Apollo. And we'd like to have 1,000 people there. We'd like to outgrow the place and spill out to our auxiliary place. So make plans to come to that if you want to just delve deep into it.
Well, thank you very much. This has been some really great information. I know a lot of people are excited to hear from you and excited to hear what other redesign schools are doing. So thank you for being on the show. I think that's it.
That's it for this episode. For more information about this episode, check out my website, mrstockrocks.com. If you know someone doing something awesome in their classroom, let me know about it. I'd love to have them on the show. You can email me at teachlikeaninja@gmail.com or follow me on Twitter at teachlikeaninja. I've been your host, Josh Stock, 6th grade language arts teacher and self-proclaimed awesomeness expert. Until next time, as I always tell my students, book it forward and be awesome.